Welcome to our web chat interview with Neil Macro, Global Sales Director, GMS at Misys. And we're going to be talking about EMIR, a work in progress. EMIR reporting came into effect on February the 12th, 2014. A lot of people argued it was too early. Was the market ready? Probably not. And also ESMA chose the dual reporting route, unlike the US. How have the corporates achieved compliance so far, Neil? There are different ways, aren't there?
Yeah, I think first thing I would say is in terms of how the corporates have achieved compliance is that many of them still have not achieved compliance. There are a whole raft of companies out there which are still not reporting. I think we'll kind of come back to that as a topic. But in terms of those that are reporting, one of the first ways and one of the most popular ways has been delegation of reporting to the corporate banks and counterparties. That in itself is quite an interesting one because the majority of those banks all said that they would not entertain delegated reporting initially. And then as we got closer to the 12th of February 2014 deadline, they all pretty much agreed that they would take that delegated reporting on. What
proportion of corporates are using the banks to report?
It's very difficult to say. The banks in some ways are going to be reluctant to share that information, and part of that is because the banks are not actually that keen, in all honesty, on doing this delegated reporting. It's something they were kind of pushed into. It's not something they're making much or any money out of, and in some cases, the bizarre instance with the big international banks may be registered with the CFTC and are reporting under Dodd-Frank. They don't even have a requirement to report under EMIR, yet they're still having to report their clients' trades. So I think in terms of how many, that would probably very much up for contention. I think one of the other ways is services such as ourselves and vendors such as ourselves like Misys. We have our regulatory reporting service, which we are acting as a third-party reporter for corporate customers. There are other vendors doing similar services as ourselves out there. Then you have the treasury management systems as well. Some of those are producing data in trade repository compliant formats. Some of the TMS vendors are actually connecting directly to the trade repositories as well to provide that service. And then you have some corporates who have chosen to connect directly to the trade repositories themselves, such as Regis or DTCC. That pretty much covers the ways in which corporates have become compliant.
Now, the LEI is required for this reporting, but there's been varied progress on the use of LEIs, hasn't it? Does it give us any indication of how much reporting is actually going on?
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, it's pretty much our only barometer at this stage as to who is reporting and how many companies are reporting, because it's very difficult to get that data from any other sources. Recently, there was some data from the LEI Regulatory Oversight Committee, which claimed that around, I think at the end of 2014, there was around 330,000 LEIs which have been issued, which kind of pales into insignificance when they also said that they expected around 2 million corporate entities that would need to report. So if you do the maths there, that's less than 20% of those companies or entities which should be reporting. Quite how that translates into EMIR, because that was a global figures across over 180 countries. I suspect EMIR is probably not that different in terms of the percentage of companies that are reporting. But really, the LEI issuance is pretty much the only barometer we have at this stage as to who is reporting and who's not as a percentage.
But LEIs are going to be critical to a lot of the reporting, not just this sort of reporting, but other things as well, isn't it?
So really, when the reporting started back in February 2014, there was formats and requirements with which companies had to report within. There then was level 1 validations, which was in effect a tightening of the formats and the data which was being reported. And then later this month, we have level 2 validations coming in. These are imposed by ESMA, not by the trade repositories. And as I said, this is the idea and the intention is to improve the quality of the data which is already being reported.
And this reporting, improving the quality, Is it addressing the problem of intra-company transfers and trade?
Not really. I mean, the intention to improve the quality of the data which is already being reported, in many ways, you could argue that it's punishing those companies which are already compliant and have made to do their trade reporting, whereas those companies which are not yet reporting at all, they're kind of getting off scot-free in some ways. So firstly, it's not addressing the problem of those companies which have chosen not to report at all as yet. In answer to your question on the intercompany transactions, I don't think the level 2 specifically addresses that. I also think that's something else which in many ways has been kind of overlooked. I think there are some companies which have chosen to report and have found a solution for their external bank-facing trades. I don't believe all of those companies are reporting all the trades they should be, such as the intercompany and internal trades where there is a requirement for them to report that. I think they've got over the first hurdle of reporting their external facing trades. And I think for that reason, they're certainly not going to come up on anyone's radar as being uncompliant, not for some time soon. But I think there's more to be addressed within those companies as well.
So going back to the companies that aren't reporting, is there any sign of them being punished or retrospectively being punished? Because they really are, as you say, getting away with it scot-free.
Yeah, and I think in many ways that's the kind of $6 million question. My view, as we are right now, is that there's no real incentive for those companies which are not currently compliant to start reporting, and there's no real punishment being handed out either today or retrospectively for those that haven't become compliant. So, you could argue there's no carrot and there's also no stick for these companies. So I really do think that that needs to change, and fairly soon. If EMIR regulation is to do what it was intended to do, specifically around OTC trade reporting, it's no good just having a small percentage which are reporting. It needs the mass and the majority of those companies reporting. So I think certainly the authorities and the regulators need to start thinking about clamping down on those companies who are not reporting, so we get some consistency and a good proportion of companies that are reporting.
So that's one headache that's going to come to some companies. And EMIR is clearly going to here to stay, but there are developments elsewhere in the world, new reporting requirements. What's going on and how is this going to be managed?
Yeah, I mean, if you look across the pond in the US, when they implemented Dodd-Frank, the OTC reporting element of that obviously was much simpler because it was single-sided reporting and had very little impact on those corporate customers. Then along came EMIR, which was and has been much more troublesome, trying to get both sides to report and both sides compliant. In the meantime, the rest of the world, to some extent, kind of took a step back to see how Europe and the US played this. And I guess really to sort of learn from their mistakes, to see what worked and what didn't. And that's exactly what we're seeing. You have in Singapore, for example, with MAS, ASIC in Australia, there's reporting requirements in Japan. You have the FINFRAG regulations in Switzerland, which will be forthcoming in 2016. You have Canada, which has just gone live in terms of reporting. Now, all of these reporting in these other jurisdictions, they have different and varying levels of impact on the corporate clients. In some cases, it's single-sided. In some cases, it's dual reporting. And in some cases, it's a kind of combination of both. So there's different factors in play as to what impact it has in corporates in other areas and other countries.
Now, you must be addressing this as both an opportunity to get more business, but also to help corporates manage this multiplicity of reporting. What are you doing there? Because you're talking about very different things in different parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, when we put to market our this regulatory reporting service, that was done very much at the ask of our corporate client base. They came to us asking for a solution which we duly provided. And that was very much with EMIR in focus. However, when we built this system and designed this system, it was always my goal that this would ultimately become a multi-jurisdictional reporting service. And our current corporate customers that we have, they do have requirements in other countries as well. So as we speak, we are expanding our reporting capabilities at the moment under EMIR to the likes of Canada, to the likes of Singapore, and we're looking very closely at what's going on within Switzerland, where we will expand our reporting capabilities for there as well. So the idea is that we become a kind of one-stop shop for our corporate customers to meet their reporting requirements, regardless of the jurisdiction and the country that they're in.
Yeah, most multinationals have multi-jurisdiction reporting. Has there been any reaction from the corporates in terms of how they want to deal with this? Will the mix between own reporting TMS and providers like yourselves change?
I think it's difficult to predict how this is going to play out. I think the TMS vendors that have put solutions in place will continue to provide that service. We will continue to provide the service as a third-party reporter. The only thing which I think is perhaps difficult to predict are those companies which have chosen to delegate the reporting to their banks. I think I kind of mentioned that this is not something the banks are kind of loving doing. It's not something they're making a lot of money out of. They've done it almost sort of reluctantly. And as I think I alluded to previously, some of these banks are not actually they're originally domiciled here in Europe. They are actually reporting under CFTC for Dodd-Frank, yet they are doing delegated reporting for their corporate counterparties. So they're not even having to report their own side, they're reporting their counterparty's side. So we do wonder whether at some point some banks may pull away from the delegated reporting. It'll be a brave bank that goes first on that. But if they do start to do that, then solutions like ours and the TMS solutions, I think, are going to become much more prevalent and more future-proofed in terms of reporting.
So the future is regulatory reporting with simpler options and facilities.
Yeah, and I think from a corporate perspective, and this is not sort of to generalize across all corporate customers, but in many ways, the corporates have a requirement to be compliant for OTC reporting for EMIR. Many corporates want someone to take that headache away for them. And this is kind of what we are aiming to do with our regulatory reporting service. We have a whole raft of corporate customers who use our confirmation matching service, CMS. Now, they were already giving us their OTC derivative data, and they're asking us, could you please also get that data to the repository, which is exactly what we've done. So we'll continue to try and take the corporate's headaches away by doing both of those services for them in one single window.
Thanks, Neil. Most interesting and really important for corporates, admin and basic processing.
You're welcome.